Hi everybody, my name is Danielle Nicole and welcome to Monetary Makeup. So today is going to be all about the brows. So e.l.f. recently released their new brow lift product and I thought it would be a great idea to compare it to the Anastasia Beverly Hills Brow Freeze Styling Wax. So I'm really curious to see how this $6 e.l.f. brow lift compares to the ABH $23 Brow Freeze. So while we go head to head with these two brow products, the topic of the day is going to be regarding legacy planning with your investments and how this one tip could perhaps help you avoid probate. So if you're excited to get started, don't forget to hit the like button and let's get started right now. So I'm going to zoom you all in just a second here. I just wanted to mention the e.l.f. Brow Lift, which is brand new, is $6, and the ABH or Anastasia Beverly Hills Brow Freeze is $23 depending on where you purchase them. So first, let's get started with the packaging and the consistency. So I know the ABH Brow Freeze is kind of a staple. It's been around for a long time. Most people have tried this product, I would assume. But just in case you haven't, let me open this up and you do get, let's see, you get 8 grams or 0.28 ounces in the ABH Brow Freeze. And when you open it up, the consistency is pretty firm. So you can tell I've dipped in quite a few times, but the overall consistency is pretty thick. So you're not going to find any dripping with this product. As for the e.l.f. Brow Lift, I'm not sure how many ounces you get in this because it's not on the actual packaging. I'm assuming it's less than the Brow Freeze because when you look at the actual packaging, it just looks like this may be smaller. But if you are familiar with the ounces, definitely let us all know down below. So this consistency is very different. Now I haven't tried this e.l.f. Brow Lift yet, but just by taking a look at the consistency, can you see how it has kind of slid down? So to me, this says it's not a firm product. It almost looks like a jelly consistency, but a little bit thicker. So if I hold it upside down, it's not going to fall out, but it's not nearly as thick or firm, I should say, as the ABH. So let me get you guys zoomed in. Now, how I typically do my brows is I go in with a brow pen first. I'm a 90s kid, so unfortunately I over-plucked my brows, and sadly they really never grew back. I am using a brow serum that is actually working, so you'll notice I have a couple of flyaway hairs, so you can just ignore those for now. So I typically go in with a brow pen first, because I find if you go in first with the wax, the pen itself can get kind of destroyed and kind of mucked up in the glue or the brow wax. So the only thing I have on my brows right now are a couple strokes of the Urban Decay Brow Blade, and I use the shade Cool Cookie. So this is kind of a double-sided brow pen. It comes with both a pencil and a pen, but the only thing I have on my brows right now are just a couple of strokes of the pen side. I also did pick up the actual e.l.f. Brow Lift applicator because I wanted to do a side-by-side comparison. So first, let's start with the new Brow Lift applicator. So this is double-sided. So this side is almost like a scooper that you could use on any of the e.l.f. putty products or any products in general. And then the other side has a spoolie. Now the one thing I do want to point out about e.l.f.'s brow applicators in general, I really like them because they're very soft. So when you go in and brush your brows, it doesn't hurt, it's not super firm. So I thought we could also compare the ABH Brow Brush. Now theirs comes with a spoolie on one side and then a very thin brush on the other side. This is the thinnest brow brush I have yet to find that just comes naturally that way. Now e.l.f. also has a version of the brow brush. I'm not sure if it's meant to be a dupe or not because these are super common, but I just wanted to show you what these two brushes look like in comparison. So the brushes look pretty similar. I do find the ABH one to be a little bit more scratchy on the skin. So even though the e.l.f. spoolie is less expensive, I believe this is $4 if I'm not mistaken, I do prefer the e.l.f. spoolie side better. However, when it comes to the actual brush side, the difference in the brush side is pretty astounding to me. So if you can see how thin the ABH brush is right here compared to the e.l.f. one, so the ABH is a little bit more firm and much thinner, whereas the e.l.f. one is much bigger and there's a lot more give to it. So these are what the brushes look like in comparison. So let's get started with application. So I'm going to do e.l.f. on my left side and ABH on my right side. So I'm assuming this is going to be a very kind of thin jelly texture. So I'm just going to barely dip in. Okay, so it's a little bit thicker than I thought. I was expecting it to be kind of stringy, but it's not. So let me just dip in a little bit here. And then I typically take the inside of the cap and just kind of brush it through a little bit. And if I think I got too much product, which I believe I did, I just take it on the back of my hand to wipe it off. All right, let's see how the e.l.f. Brow Lift works. Now I don't do the laminated brows, I just kind of brush them up a little bit. Okay, I definitely got too much product, so I'm just going to wipe off a little bit more. It's definitely lifting my brows up. However, I swear, my brows have a mind of their own. They do not like to stay up, so I spend a little bit extra time in the front portion. So as far as this portion of my brow, I think it's doing a great job, but I am having to work at kind of getting the actual brows right here to stick up. Sorry if I'm not smiling, I'm really concentrating here. Okay, so that's what this is looking like so far. I'm really excited because I was expecting to have kind of like a white cast, but I'm not noticing any sort of white cast or any sort of clear cast, so that's really exciting. And the reason I bring up the cast is because, hold on one second. So the reason I brought that up is because the NYX Brow Glue, which I do typically like and use, but I do find this one leaves a little bit of a white cast if you go on with too much. And I noticed with the e.l.f. one, I'm not seeing any of that. So even though I went in with a little bit too much product initially, it's not doing that. So what do you guys think about the e.l.f. side so far? So it is holding up my brows so far, and I think it looks really great. The true test is if my brows are going to stay in place all day or not. A lot of brow products or glues or gels you put in and then they kind of fall down. But so far, I'm really excited. I think it looks great. Okay, next I'm going to use the ABH Brow Brush. And let's open this bad boy up. Now this product, you can use too much, so I'm really trying to only pick up a little bit. So with this product, if you just dip your brush in, it will go straight through. So just be careful if you've never tried this before. Just kind of lightly touch it like that. All right, now I'm going to brush it in. And on the other side of my hand, I'm going to wipe off some of the excess. Okay, now let's see how the ABH does. Now my brows are pretty uneven. They just don't grow exactly the same. Granted, I don't know anyone's brows who do that, but just wanted to point out this brow does typically give me a little bit more trouble. Okay, so I do think that the ABH just lifted them much quicker than the e.l.f. side. So as you notice on this side with e.l.f., I had to kind of work at it a little bit. whereas with the ABH, it was a much quicker result. However, I'm not seeing a difference when it comes to the actual texture of the brows. So what do you guys think? Do you notice a difference between the e.l.f. versus the ABH? I don't think you would be able to notice in person that I have on two different brow gels. So I'm going to give the Brow Lift and the Brow Freeze just a couple of minutes to dry down. So I'm going to finish up the rest of my makeup and then we'll come back after it is set. Okay, so I just finished up the rest of my makeup. So my brows have had a few minutes to set, and yeah, neither of them feel crunchy. You know, sometimes you use brow products and they feel really crunchy and stiff. Neither of them feel that way. So tell me down below, what do you guys think? e.l.f. side versus ABH. Alright, well next let's cut into the topic of the day, and then I'll meet you back here for the wear test and my final thoughts. Hi everybody, welcome to the topic of the day. So for anyone who has ever had any of their investments, policies, anything like that go through probate, you know it is a messy public process. So to give you my tip, I'm going to tell you a quick story. So I met a new consumer a couple of years ago, and her father had an investment policy that was of course intended to be handed down to her, the daughter. But sadly, the father never updated the beneficiary on the investment. It just never came to mind for him, and the initial beneficiary that he had passed away. So because the father had never updated the beneficiary, the daughter was not on the investment itself. So the daughter had to sadly hire a lawyer and basically had to go through a very messy, long process that was not only time consuming but also very expensive. So that entire investment that could have very easily been passed down to her from listing her as the beneficiary now had to go through probate. So the one tip I have for you regarding probate, any sort of policy, whether it's an investment, a life insurance policy, a deed, any policy that you have, every year or at least whenever you have a change in your life, I highly recommend updating your beneficiaries. And not only updating the actual beneficiary, but on most policies you can actually add a contingent beneficiary. That way, in the worst case scenario, if something were to happen to you and your listed beneficiary at the same time, you then have a contingent beneficiary that the plan or policy would then go to. So just a quick tip, probate is a messy, long process, and it can be very expensive, and also it can be a very public process. So I recommend always making sure your beneficiaries are listed correctly and updated as frequently as they need to be. So I hope this quick tip about probate and listing beneficiaries was helpful for you all. Next, let's cut into the wear test and my final thoughts right now. Hi everybody, my makeup has been on now for about 8 hours. So let's get you zoomed in so we can see how e.l.f. Brow Lift did compared to the ABH Brow Freeze. Okay, so you tell me down below, e.l.f. side for the Brow Freeze or Brow Lift versus the ABH Brow Freeze. What do you think? e.l.f. ABH. So looking up close, I cannot tell a massive difference. I'm actually pretty impressed with how this e.l.f. Brow Lift performed. So the only main difference I would say is that the ABH was immediately lifting my brows, whereas with the e.l.f. Brow Lift, I had to kind of comb through a few times to really get my hairs to stand up. Now I do struggle, my brows have a mind of their own, so they do typically want to fall down. So that's the only thing I can say. I think they both look pretty similar. I do think the ABH is just a hair more up if you look really close. They're both definitely lifted, but I do think ABH wins overall. So what do you guys think? Which brow looks better? I did want to note an honorable mention for the NYX Brow Glue. Typically, if I'm not using ABH, I'm using the NYX Brow Glue, but I do have to say I do prefer the e.l.f. over the NYX. solely because the NYX one sometimes leaves kind of like a clear, almost whitish residue. And even when I went in with too much product with the e.l.f., you did not notice any sort of residue, which is really important to me when it comes to brow glue. So overall, yes, I do recommend the e.l.f. Brow Lift. I don't think it's one of those products that is good for the price. You guys know, if you follow me, I either think a product is good or it's not. I don't really take price into the equation, so I do highly recommend the new e.l.f. Brow Lift. I do also think that the ABH is just iconic. It does such a great job in not only lifting your brows, but doing so quickly, and it does last throughout the day. But overall, I would say there's only a very slight difference in the way my brow hair stood up throughout the day. So if you enjoyed this duo between e.l.f. versus ABH, don't forget to give this video a like, hit the notification bell. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye everyone!